as a business owner, like part of the collective or the NIL stuff, you're more doing it to like help Georgia football, not to help Onward Reserve.
Yeah, I mean, they're probably gonna be mad at me for talking about all this, but I'm really probably gonna get in trouble for some of this.
Welcome to Willing to Fail. I'm your host, Peyton Bennett. Today we got a very special guest. He is the founder and CEO of Onward Reserve, which can be found in over 250 stores nationwide. So no further ado, welcome to the show, TJ Callaway. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I just listened to your podcast with Stetson Bennett as a Georgia alum myself. I thought that was a great interview. Cool hearing his story after he was kind of quiet for so long. So good luck on your podcast journey and all the other ventures you have going on. But I'm more curious of
Thank
like
you.
your any entrepreneur story is fascinating to me just because I'm familiar with it, and it's always a crazy story that you don't really hear about. You usually just see the end result, which is the mega store that is Onward Reserve. So let's kind of just backtrack to the beginning. Like, where are you from? Where did you grow up, and what were your parents like?
So I grew up in a small town in South Georgia, Thomasville. Um, my dad was a banker, and my mom was a school teacher, and I went to the school where she taught, which was a pretty small school, which was an interesting dynamic. But great, very lucky, great parents, stable home and all this sort of stuff, and all the things that you take for granted until you get older, and yeah, pretty good. I mean, it's kind of crazy thinking back on childhood. I mean, it's one of those where like you could jump on your bike and ride downtown and go to the baseball card shop. So, pretty nice situation.
Yeah, I have some friends from Thomasville. I know it's just a very small town Georgia vibe down there.
Yeah, it's a good spot.
So I mean, your parents, that's like the most stable jobs ever, like banking and teaching, right? Where do you think your entrepreneurial spirit came from?
Yeah, it's funny. I think thinking about dad with banking, I think he's, when you think about like I'm the very risk tolerant, like entrepreneur, like go, go, go. And I feel like my dad, he passed away a few years ago, but I feel like he's that voice of reason kind of talking from the other side, trying to balance things out, which works out really well. And then mom, like I said, she taught at the school where I went, so she was always around, and she knew all the gossip before I did.
That's funny. So when did you first start getting in, like start taking these small entrepreneurial ventures? Like I heard stories of you as a kid, like selling stuff on the side of the road. Like, what do you think your first business was?
Oh man, I don't even know. I talked about this in another episode that I think that true entrepreneurs are kind of born as opposed to figuring it out on their own. I think you're just kind of born wanting to do stuff, and I've always been really, really curious about how different things work, and I love the creative part of this business. I certainly didn't grow up thinking I would be in the fashion world. But now that I'm here, it's the creative side that really kind of keeps me going. So there's always, it's like the podcast. There's always some new project to take on and figure out, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it from a logical standpoint, like starting like a retail merchandise business, like it just looks like a bunch of problems for most people, like high competition, like managing inventory and sizing and all that stuff. Like, how did you first get into the just like the clothing brand business to begin with?
So the vision was to be an online destination for all the brands that at the time, I was wearing. And this is what's really kind of hard to believe is that 12 years ago when we were starting, really ecom didn't exist in any semblance of what it does today. I mean, Amazon existed, but was years from being what it is now, and I think years from even being a profitable company at that point. And like eBay and stuff like this had been around for a while, but most of the little specialty brands that we originally set out to carry on onwardreserve.com didn't have websites, or if they had websites, they were just, sort of splash pages that told you about the brand. There weren't, there were no e-commerce capabilities. So that's what got us started was, trying to be an online destination for all those brands. And then we quickly pivoted to, designing and working with factories to manufacture our own line. And rest is history. It's been a really, really awesome ride.
So you started off just selling other people's clothes, basically.
Yeah. The first store in Athens, Georgia was a specialty store, just like you would see, in any other town across the country.
So when you first started that business, like how old were you? And was there was the problem you're trying to solve is that a bunch of uh like companies didn't have good e-com? Was that the problem you're trying to solve, or were you had the vision right
Yeah,
away
I
of like,
mean, I was about 25 or 6 at the time, maybe 27. Let's call it 26. And so I did investment banking in Atlanta for a couple of years after school, was ready to not do that anymore. So that was that was the main problem that I was trying to solve for is I didn't like my job. I shouldn't say that. I liked it. I mean, I'm very glad I did it. Even more glad I'm done with it. But I was really honestly just solving for that. You know, the ecom thing seemed to make a lot of sense. And just like everybody who starts one thinks now, it's like, oh, this is so easy. You don't have to deal with, rent and all this stuff, and you can just have all this stuff in a warehouse and people are going to magically come to this website and buy it. And, the reality is the ecom side is a hell of a lot harder than the retail side, in my opinion, because if you open a store in a decent location and you've got everything else figured out, then, people will walk in. But, driving traffic to a website is tough, and sustaining that and growing that is even tougher.
do you think that was probably like the first big challenge or big hurdle was just driving traffic to the website?
Oh God, I don't know. I mean, the first challenge was just getting any of these brands to sell to us. I mean, this is crazy, but the brands not only did not have websites on their own, they had not set up any, you name it, brand at the time had not set up any framework for what, an e-commerce wholesale account might be. And so at that point, it was just like, if you have a store that qualifies, to sell our product in the store, then we will also let you sell it online. There was no distinction between the two. And so honestly, that's a big part of why we opened the first store was just to land accounts with the vendors that we wanted to carry. And then I realized I really enjoyed it, and to your point earlier, it's hard. I mean, it's not easy, and there's make no mistake. You got to really love it and really have a passion for it because I mean, it's brutal. It's a very competitive industry.
So when you were 26 years old and having that idea and starting that thing, what was like the long-term vision in your head at the time, and how is that different than what it is now?
I mean, I talk about this a lot. It's changed, frankly, 2 or 3 times, right? Because we initially started out being an e-com play for all these other brands. Then we started to realize, well, why are we, they're going to eventually do this themselves. Why are we just, point being, we're never going to be able to compete with these guys. They've got better margins than us, obviously, if we're selling the same things they are, and they're the ones manufacturing it. So, it quickly dawned on me that we had to get out of that and not be reliant on those brands anymore. And then that kind of started the journey of beginning to figure out how to make some of our own stuff, which is, there's a lot about this business where it seems easy at first. Like it's pretty easy. Like any kid, especially now with the way Shopify has come along. I mean, any kid can go print some t-shirts and throw them on Shopify and you got a brand. And frankly, it's not like getting to your first kind of million in sales is not that hard. Like it's not easy, but it's not like a monumental task if you're focusing on it full time. But getting from like 1 to 5 was the hardest period of this whole deal. And then getting from 5 to 10 was a cakewalk versus 1 to 5. And then 10 to 20 just was nothing comparatively. So it's that getting out of the like just getting started isn't really that hard because there's not a ton of barriers to entry, especially if you're just online. But then, scaling to a point where it really begins to make sense, that's hard.
What was the biggest challenge in that? Just like the like having equity to like
Oh no, I mean the
let
challenge is that there's 100 different challenges at once. I mean, obviously capital constraints are one, inventory controls one, you got to have systems, and if you're doing brick and mortar retail, I mean, a lot of people just don't think about the fact that if you have one store and a website and the website's basically shipping out of the store, like that's a you can do that. Like you and a team, a small team of people that are willing to help you can do it. But you effectively are the manager and you're the principal of all that. And then if all of a sudden you've got two or three stores and now you need a website, I mean, excuse me, now you need a warehouse and now you need an accountant because you can't do it all anymore. And now, so you've got to build a team of people who are able to lead themselves, not just follow you. So it's just, I mean, there's too many challenges to mention. I've got challenges all day, every day, and nothing's changed about that. The challenges have changed.
yeah, I feel like just being an entrepreneur and a business owner is just problem solving and you don't know what the problem is.
Yeah.
So for you, I mean, your brand is like really high quality and really, I mean, it's great. Obviously, going to University of Georgia, when I was there and graduated 2014, like you already were seeing it in a lot of places. But for like, um, for your brand, it's very like as I do more traveling, you realize that like all the country dresses different. Like your brand is very niche to like the Southern style, like the collared shirt, the khakis, like that kind of thing. Do you think that plays into you as more of an advantage that you can focus on that market, or more of a disadvantage because it limits your market?
I mean, there's two things. We've never really referred to ourselves as Southern. I mean, I clearly am, and we are based in Atlanta and I'm from Thomasville. So like there are a ton of things about Onward that are inherently very Southern. But we've always, we've just kind of we've stuck to who we are, and it's kind of interesting. There are a ton of people out there that don't dress like us, and hell, there's a ton in Atlanta that don't dress like us, and Athens and Thomasville too. Um, but you'd be shocked. I mean, there's a lot of pockets of New York where people dress just like us, and California as well. And the funniest place of all, Texas is different Texas is more different than Georgia than New York, which is remarkable. And you take that to the bank. Like it's just a different world. I mean, and so we just kind of stay true to who we are as a brand, and we love, having anybody that identifies with it and sort of aspires to be part of it. We'd love to have them along. And I think that makes it easier because then you're not, and it's a little bit rare because most people in our industry, you know, especially the big kind of private equity backed things. It's like, some guy went to Harvard Business School and came up with this thesis, and he's like, here's my customers that I'm after, and here's how we're going to target those people and get their money for these products. And that's all well and good. And those guys, a lot of them have made a fortune and they've found a really good, niche. And that's just never been us though. I mean, we're all about building our brand and building who we are, and we'll see where it goes. I'm not in a big hurry. I still control 100% of the company, and I like my job, and here we are.
I was gonna ask too. You said you own 100% of the company. Was there any times where you had to raise capital, and what was that process like?
I do have a couple of kind of early friends and family type investors, but they're all silent and they've been great. And thankfully, the last really 10 years, we haven't raised any outside capital. We've been very, you know, frugal and kind of prudent with what we spend money on. And thankfully, we've, knock on wood, we've been able to grow fast enough to kind of help, you know, sustain our growth with cash flows. So I'm really lucky in that regard. And yeah, but it was actually one of my as a mentor that ended up investing with us, and it was him that suggested that I be the only Class A member. So we never have to vote on anything. And I think that in hindsight was brilliant for a couple different reasons. One, I feel like if you've got rules, you're going to try to get as close to them as you can and bend them where you can and whatever. And if you don't have any rules, then it's just on you to do the right thing. And if you're a bad guy and you were looking to steal their money in the beginning, then you just go ahead and get it over with. And if you're, trying to do the right thing long term, then, you know, you try to do the right thing by them long term. So it was really, really, really smart the way that he set that up, and Lord knows I'm thankful for it because I, don't have to deal with us fighting over where to open stores or what to do and this, that, and the other.
Yeah, that's definitely the way to do it. Just stay in charge of it. Let it just keep growing organically. And I
Yeah.
saw that the motto for Onward Reserve was live authentically, which you kind of touched on a little bit of like staying true to who you are. Where did that motto come from and what does that mean to you?
I mean, authenticity is the most important thing to me because, like I said, it's very important that we are who we are. If you walk into one of our stores, you're very quickly gonna either say like, "Man, this is the coolest place I've ever been," or you're gonna be like, "What is this place? This is not for me." And that's great. Like that's what we want because that means you've built a strong brand that people can identify whether they can articulate it or not. And I don't even know that I can articulate it, but you can, you got five senses. And if you walk in a store in a perfect world, all five of them fire off and you're either going to like it or you're not.
Yeah. So I mean, kind of backtracking like to your process of building the brand, like I feel like or a lot of entrepreneurs get caught up in the process of like just visualizing like the long term goal and like working towards that, and then not realizing like the journey of getting there is probably the most fun and rewarding part of the whole process. What are some parts of like the early days of Onward Reserve that you look back on and like cherish or kind of miss those days where you could do those things?
Oh, it was the best. I mean, those were the best. I talked about this with Connor Smith, who's a young country music artist who was on our podcast, and I was just telling him like, you're gonna look back at these days and realize that these were the fun ones. I mean, when you're all just scrapping it together and trying to make it work. I mean, I just remember being able to, I was still my wife and I were dating at the time, but single, wasn't married yet, didn't have kids, and I could pull one or two all-nighters in a week and fix every problem we had as a company. And now we've gotten to a point where I'm fully reliant on having a great team around me. I mean, there's no one person that can do any of this. So, I think just we mentioned control earlier. I mean, I'm a huge control freak, and so that being able to have a group of people around me that I trust to make the right decisions is the most important thing. And then as far as just the enjoyment, I mean, some of those same people, our first store in Athens, I mean, we didn't have any money to build it out. I like went to Home Depot and bought paint and hammers and everything else. And we got in there and worked until midnight for however many days in a row until it was done. And I mean, that was fun. Like having the time and flexibility to build it with your own hands. And you just never, if I could go back and relive any period of the whole journey, it would certainly be something on the earlier end.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you're talking about like the importance of hiring a team. Obviously, now you definitely can't do everything on your own. And in my own personal business ventures, I feel like that's sometimes the hardest challenge is just finding the right people. Like, because you want to have people you can trust, but at the same time, you don't want to just get your friends that you trust that aren't good workers or feel entitled to your success. And then you don't want the complete strangers. Like, how do you balance in finding good people other than the luck part of it? Like, what is your process of finding someone
Oh
that's
gosh, I
like,
think you gotta hope that you're a good judge of character on the front end, and when you make a mistake, admit it and move on as quickly as you can. Somebody told me at one point you should be very slow to hire and very quick to fire. So, be very, very careful about who you hire. And if you realize you've made a mistake in the hiring process, fix it the second you feel like you should. Because, keeping somebody around is not a favor to them or you. I mean, if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. And you sometimes you just have to admit you made a mistake and move on. And I've made both, the two pieces of advice there. I have gone against that advice more times than I can count because especially now, it's like you need a store manager because somebody left or something happened or this, that, or the other. The store's, not open until you find one. So it's very tempting to just take the first person with a pulse that comes along. But I can promise you, you're going to regret that. I mean, you'd be better off, having it take 2 months to get a manager than be stuck with a bad manager for 2 years. So those are really hard things. But I personally, there's some people that make this work, and people ask me all the time if my wife works in the business. I can't even imagine if she and I worked together. She's awesome, but she's the opposite of me, and she does a lot of really great things, and I've got my things, and then we go home and we're able to leave work at work, and so yeah, I don't like to hire people that I know, and I don't like to hire. I certainly don't like to hire any sort of family, because it's always, there's always going to be something that happens. And when we were smaller, I mean, this has changed a little bit because we've just gotten bigger. But I really hate when people at the office, get involved in relationships with each other because it's like, okay, well, there's a decent chance this ain't going to work out. And when it doesn't work out, it creates a whole lot of drama and problems for everybody else that just, yeah, it's just easier without it.
Definitely. So speaking of having a family, like when you're involved, like when you're starting your journey of starting this company, I'm sure there was family members that were supportive, but maybe there was also some that were like showing like signs of doubt. But for you internally, like in any entrepreneur journey, there has to be like some point in time where there's a lot of doubt. Like what do you think looking back was like the time where you were most scared, or was it always just full of confidence for you?
I think I mean, if back to sort of the natural born entrepreneur thing, you just don't think about it. Because I mean, anyone in their right mind, if you're a logical person, if you're a banker or a lawyer or an accountant or whatever, if you're weighing all the risks, you're not going to do it because there's too many. I mean, there's the risks. Even as I sit here today with a business that's bigger than I had really ever even thought, about in the beginning, there's still a ton of risk compared to what a lot of people are willing to tolerate. And so, you know, I I never really, I always had a vision, and I was always sort of I still am sort of driving towards whatever that next thing is. And if you stop to think too much about the risk, um, you can't. It would be crippling. You just have to just press forward. And I was very lucky. My family was very supportive. I mean, I think they were kind of like, this is an interesting deal. Good luck. But because I had an investment banking job in Atlanta, a great job that, a lot of people would love to have. And walking away from that, to my banker dad seemed like a very risky move. But I don't think he ever was mad about it or anything. So I was lucky to have a lot of people around that supported me, and I think that a lot of, I mean, I think I'm quite certain that a ton of people probably doubted me because they're like, "What the hell are you doing? You quit an investment banking job, you're moving back to Athens, and you're going to start a website to sell clothes. Like that makes no sense." But like, good luck. And I didn't have time to think about it. The first 2 or 3 years, I didn't do anything but work. So you don't have time to think about it.
Was there a point in that journey where like you hit some type of checkpoint or milestone where you felt like, okay, that now I'm like reassured, like now I know that I made the right step, like this is really going to work full time? Or did you already, when you started it, you already had that mindset of like, this is it, burning all my ships. This is going to work for sure.
It's pretty quickly therein that you have to make that call because you're either going to do it or you're not. And so yeah, I mean, it was pretty. We burned the ships pretty quickly, and it's all you can do because you're putting it all on the line. I mean, I remember at one point it was like people were asking for personal guarantees on stuff. And I was like, I'll sign them. It doesn't matter. I mean, like I've already, like if this doesn't work, there's nothing there. So you can, sure, I'll sign as many personal guarantees as you want because they're not worth anything. I mean, they're worth something in, philosophical terms at that point because you want to make sure that the person is bought in. But it's like, I mean, my net worth at that time was zero. It was probably negative. So, yeah, you just have to just go.
So what has been the biggest changes you've seen in your industry from the time you started, which was what year did you first open that website?
So the Athens store opened in 2012, which is what we really use like for our marketing and everything. But the website launched earlier that year, really almost, I mean, we were working on the website in late 2011 and everything has changed. God, I mean, it was so cheap and easy to advertise on Facebook and other, anything that was out there digitally was dirt cheap compared to what it is. Excuse me, compared to what it is now. And if, that's one of those if I had known then moments where it's like, God, if I had known then, I'd have plowed so much more money into just customer acquisition online. That stuff's gotten so brutally competitive. Um, and I'm very old school, so this goes against most e-com people's thought process. But the way a lot of brands work is they raise a bunch of money from venture or private equity or whatever. And then, they come up with, here's what a lifetime value of this customer is. And, for a product that no one has ever purchased before. And so there's no way, and you can refine over time and like narrow in on what your lifetime value of a customer really is. But, they've just determined that, okay, if I can sell them this pair of shoes, that customer's worth $2,500 over the lifetime of, that. So we're willing to spend $400 selling them a $200 pair of shoes where we make $100. That math doesn't work for me. I've always wanted to grow profitably because to me, and everybody's different, to me, it was more important to maintain control. And you hear in the private equity world all the time, it's like, well, would you rather own, 10% of $1 billion company or 100% of $100 million company? I'm like, well, I would much rather own 100% of $100 million company and be able to do whatever the hell I want with it. And there, I feel like most people are on the opposite side. I don't know if it's ego or what, but they would rather have the bigger company. And anyway, so I'm just really old school in that regard. And now we've gotten off track. But to answer the question, when you've got people out there spending like that, it's for some people it works out and great. But for a lot it doesn't, and it's unsustainable. And so it's created a world. I mean, that's why I bought a bunch of Facebook now Meta stock a while ago because I was just like, this is insane. What people are paying for this. So anyway, that the world has completely changed in that regard. The world's also changed because of platforms like Shopify that have gotten so much better since 10 years ago. Like I said, I mean, a 14-year-old could have a brand tomorrow if he starts tonight. Don't know that it's going to go anywhere. I don't make a habit of discouraging people from doing entrepreneurial things. But most of those don't work. But point being, the barriers to entry are nothing, right? I mean, it's if you got $500 and a credit card to link up to Shopify, you can start something tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has all shifted a ton. And yeah, like 10, 12 years ago, the like value of spending money on ads and that they would perform, that they could just show up, or like now it's more of like I've talked to other entrepreneurs on this podcast where they would have a product and they would reach out to content creators to promote their product, right? And then they realize like, man, I'm spending so much money using their platform. What if I just build my own platform and then I wouldn't have to pay for advertising? Is that kind of the reason why you started the podcast to kind of build your own, or what has your relation been with content creators that are going that route?
So we've partnered with a lot of, sort of influential people over time. But they've all been, back to the authenticity thing. I mean, they've all been authentic fans of our brand. Like we've never paid someone to promote Onward that wasn't already a customer. And so the amazing thing is some of the more impressive people that wear our stuff are not being paid to do it at all. They like it and they wear it. And then once we realize they like it, we will begin to send them things. But there's some really big, especially in Nashville, we've gotten to know a lot of country music guys, and there's some really big name guys that are wearing Onward just because they like it and they bought it in the store. Um, as to the podcast, honestly, the podcast was more just kind of something I got on. I got on our Instagram just on the stories a lot during COVID. And it was a really, really great way for me to connect with customers and, fans of the brands and fans of the brand and advocates of the brand and have this kind of ongoing dialogue. And post COVID, it's just not feasible because every day there's all kind of different stuff going on. I may be traveling or this, that, and the other, but I just don't have time to be on there all the time. Or I'm just got off the phone with a, you know, contractor that's saying our store here, there, or wherever is delayed, and then I'm in a bad mood and don't want to be on there. So, it's not feasible anymore. And so I really wanted the podcast to kind of be a way for people to get to know me and get to know Onward on a deeper level, kind of how we had been doing it on the Instagram stories. And that was really my hope. And then, so it's not so much about selling anybody anything, but it is very much about kind of, telling the story of who we are and getting to feature um, some of the interesting people that we've met along the way.
Gotcha. That makes sense. What's kind of like the vision going forward the next 5, 10 years? Like, what are your predictions of how the industry is going to continue to shift, and what's kind of your strategy to attack that?
We're going to continue. I've always said that, all we do is try to do things better. We got to try to be better than we were yesterday. And every month, where were we this same month last year? Because our business is so cyclical. You really got to compare June to June and May to May and all this kind of stuff. So as long as we're in better shape than we were last year, great. And I think the good thing about me that frustrates some people around here is, I'm willing to change it all tomorrow if we determine that the way we're doing things is not the best way to be doing them. And that stuff, you know, can be a nightmare when you start changing systems and all this sort of stuff. But you've got to, if you get too comfortable, that's, you know, sort of a, not my favorite saying, but it's like, you're either growing or you're dying. It's true.
No, very true. And yeah, it's always a tough balance as an entrepreneur, especially one like you that's had a ton of success of like sticking to what's worked and then adapting and changing. Like that balance, you don't want to go full swing in one way or the other. Um,
You got to be trying new things all the time. And if they work, do more of it. And if they don't work, be glad you tried because then you've learned a lesson and you can move on.
exactly. So kind of shifting from that, I mean, listening to your podcast with Stetson Bennett, obviously I can just hear in your voice the passion you have for Georgia football. And I would be remiss not to ask you kind of your experiences as a Georgia football just fan and enthusiast. Looking back, what has been kind of your fondest memories of Georgia football or some of the games you've been to?
I mean, this last few years has been incredible. And it's funny, I grew up an FSU fan. So I grew up in South Georgia. My mom went to FSU. My brother lives in Tallahassee. Like never been to a Georgia game. My dad did go to Georgia, but we were so close to Tallahassee, my mom just sort of she is a rabid FSU fan. And so that's just what we did. And so I don't have the childhood memories of Georgia that other people do. But obviously when you go to school at a big SEC school, you immediately, jump into that culture. And so obviously had a ton of fun while I was in school, but there's really, I mean, the last few years have been so special. A- Onward would not be what it is today without Georgia football and now SEC football as a whole, college football as a whole, because it's such a big part of our business in Athens where we started. And frankly, those game days and those parents' weekends in Athens are a big part of the reason we never had to raise money because we had these big influxes, on those big weekends. So I've done everything I can do to give back to the university, which has been fun. And then we were actually one of the first, or we were, I think we were the first brand to put NIL deals in front of athletes the day, at midnight, the night that that became legal. We got a lot of great press out of that. But that's been, the most fun part for me. And I've told a lot of these guys this, but, when I was in school, you just assume like, all right, well, these are all just, cocky, big, brutes that, play football and yada, yada, yada. And, having the opportunity, I mean, as a big donor, we had five or no, we had seven Georgia football players at our lake house a few weeks ago. Like they'd all been kicked off the team for, going to a booster's lake house. I mean, it's just crazy how much the world has changed. But point being, like getting to know some of these guys, you realize they're all just like really hardworking, like well balanced people. And I think that that is what has really, ignited even more passion about Georgia football and football in general. Is just getting to know the people behind it, which is, kind of like what we're trying to accomplish with the podcast. Like bring on lots of interesting people and get to know the person, behind, whatever it is that they're doing professionally. And so that's been a lot of fun. And frankly, I mean, I posted yesterday, Haynes King, who's the quarterback at Georgia Tech, has become, a friend. And then Brett Seither, who's the tight end over there, who came from Georgia. I got to know him well at Georgia, and that's kind of how I got to know some of the other guys at Tech. And I'm other than the one Saturday they're playing us, I mean, I'll be cheering for him all year. I mean, they're great dudes and they're working hard. And, I don't, there's no hate for them outside of one weekend.
Just clean old fashioned hate.
That weekend, there's a lot, but the rest of it, let them have their fun.
So
If they
I'm
become a
curious.
viable threat, that might change, but we'll let them have a little fun for now.
Yeah, while they're still like the little brother for now.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so I'm always curious, like you, especially in the media, you will really only hear about like the NIL money from the player side, and that's all that really gets talked about because that's the most interesting, right? Of like all this money these guys bring in and how that's being used in recruiting. But like, what's something that from the business that's actually paying the fees? Like, what is something that people don't know, or like, why does it make financial sense to you to pay a high performing player money? Like, how does that help your business?
The world that we exist in today, now there are outliers here, oh gosh, now I can't think. Oh, like Livy Dunn. I mean, there's an outlier like she has a legitimate massive following and has become a very legitimate influencer in and of herself. And if you follow her on Instagram, she works very hard at it and she's, she knows what she's doing. And I think that, I don't know what she's making. She's one of the highest paid NIL athletes in the country. And she's not unattractive and she's also very good at kind of being an ambassador to the brands that she works with. And then there's other people, your Arch Mannings and whatever. I mean, his last name's Manning, so obviously there's some value there. Almost all of the athletes that are being paid are, I forgot how to say this, it's not a market rate thing, right? I mean, it's all, you've got all these collectives, and then at the bigger schools, or not at the bigger schools, because we don't have any at Georgia. We'd be delighted to have a benevolent billionaire step in because we really need it. But, at most schools, it's a collective of a bunch of different people, which is what's happening at Georgia to some degree. And then and at other schools, your Texas A&Ms and whatnot, you got two or three billionaires that are just willing to pay whatever to get the right players. And so I think, and especially these Texas schools, because again, Texas is a different country. And I love Texas, love that. I love everything about Texas, but it's a totally different culture. And I think that you've got, a handful of guys that have the money and they're having fun, just kind of pretending like they're the owners of their college team. And they're willing to make that investment just in the fun. There's no market reason for most athletes to be getting the money that they're getting. So that's tough. And I'm in a very unique position because I'm actually someone like there is some value, but it's really hard to it's hard to nail down what that value is. And and we're certainly not like if an athlete is just looking for big old checks, we're not the people that are doing that. That's mostly kind of boosters and then in like I said, in some rare cases, there is a legitimate market value. Livy Dunn's just the one that keeps coming up because she's got I can't even remember. I have to look at my phone at how many followers she has. Um,
Yeah, there's a bunch
you
of
know,
outliers in there that like Caleb Williams in his last year. Like, there's definitely guys that
I mean,
probably
she's got
earned like
5.3 million followers on Instagram. I mean,
yeah.
that's legit. And but most athletes don't. And the other problem with the athletes is a lot of them, they're rock star athletes. They don't have time to be going around posting all the time on social media. And so it's hard for them. Like they've developed a good brand, but it's hard for they've developed a good brand as an athlete, but it's hard for brands who want to partner with them to monetize that because they haven't really built a following on social platforms, whether it be Instagram or Twitter, X, or whatever else you want to look at.
So for you, when you're part of as a business owner, like part of the collective or the NIL stuff, you're more doing it to like help Georgia football, not to help Onward Reserve.
For the
That-
collective, yeah, I mean, they're probably gonna be mad at me for talking about all this, but I mean, we really didn't support the collective initially because I was just like, I don't need help with that. I know all the guys. Like if I want to get in touch with Lad McConkey, I just call Stetson Bennett and he'll connect me. So like I personally didn't need the infrastructure and the network of all that. And we support the collective now because we want to see Georgia football as a whole succeed. And I think the collective's done a really good job of helping to make sure that all the guys are getting something fair. And I think what the media covers are the big names that are reportedly getting all this money. And I think sometimes the media over might be exaggerating on what they're getting. But what I can speak to the collective in Athens, hopefully without getting in trouble. But I think what the collective in Athens has done that's pretty incredible is giving some money to some guys who wouldn't be really getting any money because of their brand value. And some of them, and there's some examples of some people who've got family members that are going through rough stuff, and some of the money that they're making from the collective is going straight back to help with their dad's health issue or whatever. I mean, so there's a lot more to it, and I do think that there's some very good things coming out of it, but it's a really different world than just a few years ago.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's definitely just a few exceptions of extreme athletes that really are like can really create more money for a business by partnering with them. But yeah, I think for the most part, it's more fair than it was before. Like, I think these guys, like you're talking about, that have financial issues and they're putting their blood, sweat, and tears into a program that's raking in a ton of money. Like, I think it's fair for somebody who's like a backup linebacker to get some type of money because he's still working as hard as probably everybody else around him and still helping create that revenue. Because if you help Georgia win football games, there's a lot of money to go around in Athens and other
Oh yeah,
places.
look, for sure. I mean, I think I can we are where we are now. I can see I think the argument on both sides of it makes a lot of sense. As far as like should we pay athletes or not. The argument against it, and I'm all for it. I mean, hell, like I said, we were the first company at midnight. We were lucky that Georgia was one of the first 5 states that did it, and we were just in the right place at the right time. But we've been doing NIL longer than anybody else. That said, the arguments against it are it creates it's kind of like the arms race for, for facilities. In the past, it creates, this situation where the schools with more money are just going to have an unfair advantage over the schools that don't. And then, so that's one argument. And then another argument was, if you go to a great program and you're, you're getting free school and you're getting top the best medical care you're going to get anywhere included and meals and all this kind of stuff, and they're grooming you to then go play professionally. And then the reality on the other side of that is there's a lot of people that won't end up playing professionally. So there were a lot of really good arguments on both sides. It is what it is. The way that it all came out probably was not bad, or not probably, was definitely not best, because it was just like bam, all of a sudden it's legal and it's the Wild West, and there's really, I think every school in the country has been, scrambling to try to figure out what all this means for the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, hopefully it all settles in. I mean, I think there needs to be like a college football commissioner in place. I think there needs to be some type of like the NFLPA has, like there needs to be some type of college collective of like somebody in charge and making the rules instead of it just being like the NCAA and each school kind of just doing their own thing for sure. But last question about college football before I let you go. What being so intertwined with Georgia football, like for any high touted recruits, why do you think a recruit should go to Georgia over any other school?
Um, I mean, the reality is we're very fortunate that we mentioned the arms race for facilities earlier. Like we just so happened to have built the brand new facilities right before all this NIL stuff happened. So we're sitting on, some of the best facilities if not the best, in the country. I've got a friend who's kind of in the healthcare real estate world who toured our facility in Athens, and he's also worked with a lot of NFL teams. And he was like, "Y'all's facility in Athens is nicer than a lot of the NFL facilities I've been to," which is pretty cool. So we were just lucky to get all that stuff done right before NIL kind of took the center stage on everything. And then I think Kirby's done a just spectacular job of managing the whole situation, because there have been certain guys, my understanding is, there have been certain guys that have come to him and just said, "Look, man, I need to, or look, coach, I need to make X or I'm leaving." And he'll just say, "Well, good luck to you," because he's very focused on building a team. And I think, and I know this from some of the guys that I know that have left. I mean, there are guys that have really regretted it because, you leave and yeah, you're making all this money, but you want to win. I mean, you want to win championships and you want to be a part of a team that, has got a good chance of winning. And I think that and the transfer portal has shown it. As we've done really well in the transfer portal, and frankly, we're not. I'm really probably going to get in trouble for some of this. I mean, we are not throwing the kind of money. I know players well who I consider, you know, friends and like little brothers, who have gotten offers for a lot more money to go somewhere else, but they've chosen to stay in Athens because they believe in what, you know, Coach Smart and his team are doing there. So, um, but money's money. So like if I think, there's certainly somebody offers you $10 million to go play somewhere else, then like you probably ought to consider it. But there've also been a lot of instances where people have been promised things that didn't end up happening. So I think you got to be really careful. If you're a player out there right now listening, you got to, I mean, if somebody tells you, I'm not going to say his name, but I told somebody this the other day. I was like, and he had an offer like this, but we were having the same conversation. I was like, if somebody offers you $5 million to go to XYZ and go play, you need to make sure they pay up front or get some kind of letter of credit or something kind of guarantee that that's going to happen. Because once you leave and the transfer portal ends, like you're there. And all that's happened is, if they don't pay, all that's happened is you got screwed. And so, I hope that that's not the case, but I know that to have been the case with some people and I think that the schools or the booster clubs or the collectives or whoever it was probably had the best of intentions. Um, but, maybe they had some big donor that said they were going to front it all that decided, they changed their mind. And where we are right now, the universities still can't pay it directly. It has to be companies that are coming in third party, which creates a really volatile environment because, if a oil billionaire or whatever just changes his mind and decides he doesn't want to do it anymore, they don't
Yeah, it's
they
tough
didn't
because it's the
have
Wild
to.
West. So the schools not can't be held responsible, and then these kids don't have agents. A lot of them are 18-year-old. Like the brain isn't even fully developed. Like they're gonna make mistakes and chase money, and it's not their fault. And yeah, like you said, it's. I hope most of it's not ill intentions, like promising money, not paying. But yeah, I mean things happen, and if there's nothing in writing, there's no agents involved, then yeah, it's tough. Um, well, that was my last question about the football and your experience. Was before I let you go, was there anything else you wanted to add, or where can the people find you online or on social media?
So yeah, as far as the podcast, it's unreserved, and we're on Instagram at, gosh, I should know this. It's at unreserved podcast. Didn't even have to look. And then my personal is at TJ Callaway 4. Onward Reserves obviously got an account at Onward Reserve. And then, yeah, if you're near a store, come check us out. And, you know, website's there 24/7.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on, TJ. Thanks for telling your story and
Yeah.
talking
Thanks for
some
having
NIL
me.
with us. All right, that's a show.